Okay, cool. So we are here with the Sony ZV-E1 and the Sony A7S3. We got 24mm lenses on both, but they're not exactly the same lens. So this is the G Master f1.4, but I've set it to f2.8. This is the Sony G lens, 24mm f2.8. So the field of view is a little bit, I don't know if it's the screen size. It almost looks like the screen size or the actual image on the A7S3 is a little bit smaller than on the ZV-E1. Not sure if it's because of bordering or cropping or something on the actual image, or if it's the actual footage that comes out. But yeah, I've got them both on exactly the same settings. I'm recording on 4K HS. Now I need to think. It's 100 megs, 422 10-bit. 10-bit, yeah, that's the settings. And I'll be switching between the microphones as well. So let me just put my phone down here somewhere. So I've got the settings on auto. The only thing that's fixed, it's basically on aperture priority. So the camera has control over their own ISO settings, as well as their own shutter speed settings. So that's basically completely auto exposed at the moment. And oh yeah, we're also using active stabilization. Not, obviously we know that the Sony ZV-E1 can do dynamic active, but the A7S3 can't. So in order to compare apples to apples, we have to put both on active stabilization, which is pretty cool, because one of the questions that people asked me is, how does the active stabilization on the ZV-1 compare to the A7S3? I mean, we know that the insides of the ZV-1 is basically exactly the same as the A7S3. It is the same camera. The Sony ZV-E1 has just got that extra, it's almost like AI processor inside, and it's smaller. Maybe Sony has added some extra processing power, or maybe the AI process or something also helps with the active stabilization. So maybe we'll get better quality with the active stabilization on the ZV-E1. And also I'm using the onboard mic. So it's this onboard mic on the ZV-E1 as well as the onboard mic on the Sony A7S3. So I'll just look at the corners and you'll see how I swap between the mics. The Sony ZV-E1 I haven't put on auto. I've basically just told it to use the front to capture sound from the front. But they're both on level 20. So yeah, let's see how the stabilization is. I'm gonna do a bit of a run test. Okay, here goes. Jump, jump. I was like, dodge, dog poop. Okay, cool, got it. Okay. So yeah, there's the pups on the one side and the other pup. So yeah, that's some of the tests. I can see that now there was actually a bit of a focusing issue on the A7S3. That's interesting. What I've done is I've taken the footage from the cameras and I've obviously imported them into DaVinci Resolve, and then I've applied an additional stabilization on them with Resolve. And the nice thing about DaVinci Resolve, it actually tells you what it needed to do to stabilize the footage even further. So it gives you these graphs, and these graphs essentially tells you how shaky the original footage were. So it basically tells us how much stabilization still needed to be applied on the images to get them 100% stable. So the more these graphs go up and down, it actually means that the less the camera did its job by stabilizing the footage. So I did both. I did the running test as well as the walking test. And there are 4 lines. So the 3 of them is the rotations around the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. I think the purple one is how much you sort of zoom in and out of the footage. So that's typically if you walk forward or backwards. Then the purple line will sort of, so the purple line usually when you're walking it sort of does just go off the chart. But if I look at these graphs, I can't really see too much of a difference between the active stabilization. I think there might be a different formula that's used between the two cameras, but I can't really make a definitive decision. So I think maybe just sort of look at the two feeds and figure out which one you would prefer. Then that's the camera for you, if you want to use active stabilization. One thing that I did see that is, I mean, it can be the lenses. So it looks like it's almost like the Sony ZV-E1 is trying to underexpose a little bit. There's no compensation active on either or. They're both on exposure compensation 0. Like now, if I stand here like this, they're both on ISO 100. Both on f2.8, but this one's on ISO 5000, the Sony ZV-E1, and this one is on ISO 3200. So it's almost like the ZV-E1 wants to underexpose slightly more than the A7S3, which might be a good thing because you want that highlights to be a little bit protected. So yeah, that's basically the difference between the two. I'm going to now switch to the S-Log3 profile, just so we can see that. So this is actually the Cinetone S-Cinetone profile, PP11, yeah. So this is obviously some footage you can just take as is and just deploy it online somewhere. Or you don't have to like color transform it. You can actually just grade it as is. Or you don't really need to grade it because it's kind of good looking already. So yeah, but let's try S-Log3. So S-Log3 is also weird. I don't know why. On the ZV-E1, if you want to switch to S-Log3, you have to go into the menus and there's a flexible ISO setting you have to adjust, and it automatically activates S-Log3. Whereas on the A7S3, if you want to enable S-Log3, you just go to PP9 and then you're on S-Log3. So yeah, it's almost easier to use on the A7S3. I don't know why they sort of took the picture profile away on the ZV-E1. The only thing I can think of is that obviously in future there'll be much more settings that you can adjust on S-Log3 because it's sort of like a native picture profile. Almost like a RAW kind of thing. It's not exactly RAW, but it's close to a RAW for Sony specifically. So I think they're just getting people used to having it in the menu so that obviously because there's going to be more menu options on S-Log3, they can just go and get it there. Okay, but let's test that. Okay, and now we are on S-Log3. This is the S-Gamut3.Cine profile. So this is obviously the one that's got a bit more pleasing colors. So it's not scientifically correct, but it looks better on the eye. There's something that I saw just now that was quite weird, and that is that I think this is definitely a bug on the ZV-E1. There's a firmware coming, so I think they will fix it on the next firmware update. But when you record proxy files on the ZV-E1, so when you record in S-Log3 and you have Gamma Assist on, then the Gamma Assist is baked into the proxy files, which is not the case with the A7S3. The A7S3, the proxy files still stays S-Log3. But with the ZV-1, the proxy files is converted to Rec 709, which doesn't make it very difficult to edit because you don't actually, if you edit it, you obviously do the transform on the clip. So when you switch to proxy mode versus non-proxy mode, the color grading changes completely on the clip. Because if you're on proxy mode, it obviously uses the proxy file. And if you're on non-proxy mode, or when you render the video out, suddenly it switches to the actual clip. So I think that's a bug, but I think Sony will probably fix this soon. And yeah, so I've got HLG Assist on both as well. So they look very similar from my point of view. What I did find, I don't know, somebody needs to test this, is that when you have the Gamma Assist on S-Log3, then it's almost like the autofocus works a little bit better. I think the autofocus does get affected if you're just running pure S-Log3. I think it just doesn't, it struggles because obviously there's not as much contrast. So yeah. Okay, so, but as we know, there is some issues with S-Log3, and that's when it comes to low light. So let's, okay, no, this is not low enough. But the problem with S-Log3 is obviously that it's got that dual native ISO, and it switches at 12,800, I believe, and I think both switches. Yeah, I did do some tests where they both switch at 12,800. So I'm just going to go to a little bit of a darker spot here in the house. There might be some cats meowing in the background because they can hear that I'm here. So yeah, now you'll see, okay, now the ISO is pretty crazy. Okay, let me manually do the ISO. So one of the issues with S-Log3 is that when you're in a low light environment and you operate between ISO, like let's say 3000 to 12,800, then the footage is very, very, very noisy. So that's what I want you to look at in the next clip. So look at my shirt and you'll see the noise in my shirt as it builds up from ISO 3000 to 10,000, and you'll see at 12,800 suddenly that noise goes away. That's when it switches to the next base ISO. Now in HLG this happens a lot earlier. I think it's around about ISO 3000. So that's why HLG is actually a little bit easier to work with, because you don't have that noise gap in your ISO. Okay, so now they're both on ISO 2000, so I'm going to step them up. So the ZV-E1 2500, A7S3 2500, ZV-E1 3200, A7S3 3200. So this side 4000, 4000, 5000, 5000, 6400, 6400, 8,000, 8,000. Yo, hand are getting tired. 10,000 and 10,000. 12,800, 12,800. Yeah, I saw them both switch just now. I'm just gonna go jump a little bit to 20,000 and 20,000. And now I'm gonna go a little bit higher. Let's go to like 51,200 and 51,200. Okay, and I'm going to go even higher. Let's max it out to the normal ISO range. So this is the standard ISO range. Top of the range, 102,400. And yeah, this is sort of the max, but I have basically allowed it to go higher than the max, so let's go a bit higher. I don't know which one actually is, if there is a... Okay, this one can go to 409,600. This was also 409,600. For some reason this one looks like there's a little bit more detail, but it's only on this flippy screen, so I don't know if that actually means anything. But yeah, that's a basic ISO test. Auto. Okay, cool. So we are both on auto now. HLG 2. Let's see how this looks if we go out into the sun. But like I said, the ZV-E1's got a bit of an advantage, because the ZV-E1 can actually go down to ISO 80 if there's a lot of sun. So yeah, now the ZV-E1 is on ISO 80 and the A7S3 is on ISO 100. So now, ironically, the shutter speeds is exactly the same. They're both on 1,400, even though this one's on ISO 80 and this one's on ISO 100. So I think the lenses does have a difference, make a bit of a difference with this. So we can't 100% compare apples to apples, because obviously this is a GM lens, this is a G lens. Same f-stop, but not 100% the same quality of glass. So now I've just swapped the lenses back so that we can sort of compare apples to apples, kind of. So this is now the G lens 24 f2.8. This is now the G master lens 24 f1.4, but set to 2.8. So now let's see the exposure. Yes, now it's a bit weird because this one is on ISO 100, shutter speed 3200. This one's on ISO 80, shutter speed 4000. So it's almost like either it tries to underexpose or this lens just lets in a lot more light. I don't know. So yeah, now at least we're comparing apples to apples. If you like this video, remember to press the button. If you want to see more, please remember to subscribe. Until next time, this is Steve. Ciao.